Hello, everybody, and good evening. I hope you guys are having a wonderful week. So, welcome to My EdTech Life. I am excited to be here with you all today. It is a midweek show. It's very rare right now, but we made it happen. And I am excited because today we have an amazing, amazing guest. And I'm just thrilled to be here talking to her. And she's joining us, and she's going to just share her passion for education. I mean, if you follow her on social media, or actually if you do know the work that Daphne does, she does some amazing, amazing work in empowering students through coding. She's a wonderful educator. And on top of that, she just has a creative outlet that she'll talk a little bit more about and the work that she's doing with Codebreaker. But I am just excited and just very filled with joy that today I have the wonderful and amazing Daphne McMenemy joining us here tonight live on My EdTech Life.
Amazing.
Daphne, how are you today, Daphne?
I'm good, Fonz. How are you?
I'm doing great. As you can tell, I am hyped up. I am pumped. It is midweek. And of course, I have a phenomenal guest. And I know the conversation today is going to be amazing. So I'm definitely looking forward to that.
I'm so excited to be here.
Excellent. Well, Daphne, let's go ahead and get started and dive right in. And, for our audience members that are watching and are getting to know who you are for the very first time and that are going to be rewatching, if you can give us a brief introduction in your context and education. And if you don't mind, if you can add one interesting thing about yourself that people may not know.
Okay. So this is my 17th year in education. I've been teaching so what we call here in Ontario is the primary, so K to 3 space for most of my career. I spent 1 year in grade 4 or 4th grade. But my heart belongs to our youngest learners, definitely. I started my career in in grade 2 and 3, and then I slowly trickled down into 1st grade and then into kindergarten, where my world was sort of rocked. Teaching kindergarten is a whole different ball game. It's a whole different world. Physically, you're usually in a different part of the building. You have a different schedule than everybody else, and you're just teaching these tiny people who come to you with just so much awe and wonder in the world. And such a vast difference in abilities and needs and wants, and where they all meet you is so different. So I spent 4 years in kindergarten, and it was the hardest thing I've ever done in education, and it was absolutely the best thing I've ever done in education. So I moved out of kindergarten last year. Our COVID numbers made our classes a little bit smaller with remote learning and all that sort of stuff. So I am back into grade 1 and 2 this year, which I think is where my heart is those tiny little learners who I love. So I've been teaching 17 years. I've been integrating technology my entire career. When my career started, technology was overhead projectors and the big TVs on the AV carts with VCRs built in. That was a big deal. And then DVD players. Then, I was doing all sorts of stuff with camcorders when I could, when we had options for that in our schools. And then I slowly moved into, laptops and smart boards and iPads. And then I was introduced to coding at a tech conference that I went to here in Ontario, Niagara Falls. And I went into a session where this kindergarten teacher was using robots in her classroom, and she was teaching her kindergarten students how to code. And I thought, if she can do it, I can absolutely do it. I was teaching grade 1 and 2 at the time. And so I brought robots home from the conference and brought them straight into my classroom. And here we are 6 years later. And it's a major part of my program.
Nice.
So, yeah.
I love that. I love that. And I mean, just to hear, just the way that everything moved and what you were already trying to do and applying all that tech, and then just going to a conference. And usually that's kind of where it starts. I mean, a very similar story for myself, going to a conference and then learning more about coding. And just don't tell Brian this, but I started following Brian, and I was like, man, this guy's pretty good. So I started
Right?
getting a lot of ideas. And I started integrating a lot of that when I was doing 6th grade. And then I moved to 5th grade when I started a full on coding club at our elementary. And it was just wonderful. But to hear you like just so enthusiastic about bringing this in with the littles. Now, I I I know oftentimes there may be teachers that may think, "Oh no, like we can't do that. That's just too much." But you're doing it. So tell me a little bit about that experience.
So so you spoke about Brian, and I remember seeing his journey all over Twitter, and I remember seeing the things that he was doing in his classroom with his students, and then when he was, um, traveling and doing things with students everywhere. I just remember being in awe of all of the stuff that he was doing with these students, and ranging in all ages, and the different things that he was doing with these kids. And it seemed so out of reach for me at the time. It seemed like something that somebody else could do, and I would get there eventually. But I had no sort of plan in place. The year that I brought robotics into my classroom was the year I had a group of kids who I personally found were very disengaged from learning. When I got them, they weren't interested in being at school. They were simply, and not all of them, but they were simply there because that was their job. They had to be at school. And a side note, those kids that I taught were my inspiration for writing Gracie, which hopefully we get to chat about later. But yeah, so I met this, I had this group of kids who were really disengaged, and I couldn't get them to connect. I tried different types of technology. It worked with some kids, not others. I couldn't really hook them. And then I brought these robots in and thought, this is something new. Let's try it out. Let's test it. And I remember opening the boxes in the classroom with the kids. I'd never used these. I'd never seen them. It was Dash and Dot robots. And we just started pushing buttons and seeing what happened. And all of a sudden, my quietest kids, my kids who, I had one little boy who hadn't really said more than a sentence to me in months at school, and didn't talk for most of his kindergarten year, really, really disengaged, suddenly, was engaged, and suddenly started taking an interest in learning, so long as this sort of robotics was part of it. So I had two options. I could have forced things at him, and I tried that. Don't get me wrong. And I was just met with silence, and I was met with fear, hesitation. Not totally sure. I still couldn't tell you where his head was at, but he just wasn't interested. And that was a lot of the kids that I had. And then all of a sudden, I had to sort of sit back and figure out how to integrate this, because this is what they were interested in, into my entire program. So at the time, coding and robotics was not part of our curriculum in Ontario. That's actually very new. That just happened last year. So for me to be bringing these robots into the classroom was very sort of play-based, and not everybody saw education the same way I did. I didn't share maybe some of the same traditional views or thoughts that others did on education. And so to bring these in and to integrate them into literacy, people didn't see how you could do that, or integrating our robotics into our science program, into our reading and writing. So I was met with a little bit of hesitation from other educators, not understanding how I was able to continue to teach the curriculum through this sort of medium. So eventually I just set out to prove that I could, and not prove, maybe prove to myself that I could. And I wanted to, I started realizing that a lot of people saw this type of technology for our oldest students. And so I started meeting a lot of people who were of the mindset that this type of learning and this type of tech was for our oldest students. We teach them first, and then we can give our older students the job of teaching the younger students. And having taught younger students my entire career, I just saw the benefit of having them teach our older students, and B, knowing what they were capable of. And if I became very passionate about allowing our youngest learners to really, dive into their own passions and make that decision for themselves, but then teach other people, and not necessarily always have to have the big kids teach them and tell them what to do and what things are supposed to be like. I wanted to give my kids this opportunity to say, no, look what we can do. We're 5, we're 6, we're 7 years old, and look what we can do. And so I started really, really advocating for this type of learning with our youngest learners, to show everyone, that no, they can and they should. because if we wait to start, we're losing so many opportunities and so much time to see where they could be in 8 years versus waiting 8 years and then have them eventually learn then. So I became a very loud advocate for, maybe obnoxious might be a fair word, for the learning that our youngest students can do. And not just in tech, and everywhere. Like, look what we can do. We can do it. You know, it's going to look different because we're little, but we can do it.
I mean, it's just the passion. I mean, you see it and you see the potential. And, you know, a lot of what you're saying just really, you know, touches me, because I had a similar experience. I mean, going in 6th grade and then trying things out and being that the early adopter, the kind of like trying new things. And even if they fail, it's okay. We tried it. We're going to figure it out. And allowing students and empowering them, and then having them teach me. I'm like, you know, this is really cool. And you build that community. But oftentimes we do not give our students enough credit. Like, you know, we think like, oh no, this is too much of a waste of a time, and so on and so forth. But the skills that you develop, and I love what you said, you know, as opposed starting them off young, as opposed to waiting until they get into maybe junior high, when they may see coding through robotics, or maybe, you know, 4th grade, 3rd grade, when they do FFL junior, and or the first Lego League and things of that sort. But why not start them off very young, and why not include it in curriculum? And so one of the things that I loved, and in the elementary that I was at in 5th grade, was I would bring out the Makey kits, and I would integrate them into my science class. And the students, through Scratch, were creating their own things. They were creating their own little programs to find whether something was a conductor or not a conductor. And they pretty much just learned on their own. I gave them the basics, but they were empowered. They were happy. They were thrilled. And the other thing is that we noticed is they wanted to come to school. They were always like, no, I don't want to miss class. And they would tell their parents, can we reschedule the dentist or doctor appointment till after I see Mr. Mendoza, because I want to know what we're going to be doing in class, and I don't want to miss out. Because we were always had the Chromebooks out, we had the Makey kits out, we were always programming, but we were integrating it into our curriculum, which coding is not part of our curriculum. But I love what my great friend Matt Wood says, is like, they don't teach you how to teach the standard, but they give you your sandbox. I was in that sandbox playing around, and sometimes I would kind of get to that edge where they were like, hey, you're kind of pushing it a bit. But, you know, the kids were learning, and they were engaged, and they were learning skills that are transferable, cross-curricular. Because if you think about it, that critical thinking, you need that in reading. And in a world where we live full of state assessments and things of that sort, I mean, critical thinking, inferencing, computational thinking, they all go hand in hand. And, you know, it's just breaking everything down into a little algorithm, simplifying those problems, and you go from there. But I love what you're doing at such an early age, and having them empowered, seeing what they can do, and getting so excited about this. So that's wonderful. I love it.
It almost became my mission to prove. I think I had something to prove. That now I no longer have anything to prove. But at that time in my career, I felt like I had something to prove, that, you know, no, look what these kids can do. And I felt that, and it could have been something that I had, interpreted incorrectly, but I felt as though many people looked at my students, or just young students in general, as having sort of a set level of ability because of their age or their experience or what have you. And I needed to prove to them, and maybe I needed to prove to my kids that no, you are more than a label. You are not what people tell you you are. You are what you want to be. And for me, that was the integration of coding into my program. That's what it did. And so each year, as I moved sort of lower into the grades, I upped my game. So when I started with coding and robotics, I was using a very basic sort of path app with these bots. And then as I moved lower, I started introducing, like, I went backwards. So I started introducing block coding younger and younger. And then I got to kindergarten, and I have kindergarten students using Scratch and Makey, and they're block coding, and they're 4 and 5 years old. And I have my students on the first day of junior kindergarten here, and some of them are 3, coding, because it's not oh my God, you're 3 and you're coding. No, oh my God, you're 3 and you're at school and this is part of school now. So I just have become an advocate for giving our kids this opportunity. And, there's only so long you can live within that sandbox. And I have found, with me, if I'm sort of forced to be in the sandbox, I get a little messy and loud and obnoxious, and then sand goes everywhere and people don't like it. take that for how you want to read it. But the kids do the same thing. And then what I start to find is then we complain because they can't live within the confines of the sandbox we're forcing them to live in. And until we stop to see, well, get them out of the sandbox or make it bigger, that's when they start to become empowered learners. And when they become empowered learners, your job becomes so much easier because you just get to sit back and watch and guide as opposed to, point and shout. So it's, they can and they will. It is our job to give our learners these opportunities. That is such an important thing, is that we can't look at them as their age. We just need to look at them as learners, and let's let them learn.
I love that. I love that. And I mean, just your passion. And like you said, hey, you know what? I can relate to you. I was one of those that definitely start kicking sand, and sand was going everywhere. But it's the way that the kid, I mean, you see that they have the potential, and you say like, hey, they can definitely play outside the sandbox, and they have the capability, and they feel empowered, and they feel comfortable. One of the things that I wanted to touch on is, like you were saying, is like, one of the biggest lessons that I learned, and it wasn't until I moved from high school to elementary and was able to have, full day with my kiddos and, doing the coding and all that good stuff, was that community that we built where I can, like you said, be that guide on the side and just watch them just really dive in deep, and not just superficial level, like, hey, we're just here to solve the problem and do this, but going in deep where they're like, hey, I look, we took this to another level. Then all of a sudden I had students with Scratch. They were building their own solar systems, where now they had the camera set up where the solar system was there, and they would just point, and then all of a sudden they had the information for the planet. They were doing the water cycle and so on. And it was just wonderful that we had that opportunity. And I was posting so much stuff on social media that even Scratch MIT contacted us, and they even did a piece on my 5th grade class
wow.
because of the work that they did. I mean, all I did was just give them the tools, empower them, and I stood by just stood by them, watched them grow, and they were able to do just some amazing things. And that's the wonderful part about it, when you get to empower the students. So that's great. So Daphne, let's just go back, and we're going to get into, of course, Discover Gracie and all of that. But I want to know, and usually, I mean, we got real deep into this, but originally, did you always want to go into education, or was that something like later on that you said, oh, you know what, maybe I'll just go into education? Let me know about that. Where did that interest for education come from?
I've always wanted to be a teacher. I remember from very young, probably 8 or 9 years old, just deciding that that's what I was going to do. I always loved school. I was that kid. I loved the creative part of school. I like learning. I just, I had teachers who really, there's the quote that says, they're not going to remember what you said, but they'll remember how you made them feel. And that's what I can relate to with teachers that I had. And I just always that was my plan. But when I went off to university here in Ontario, you need to have, a degree, and then you get your Bachelor of Education on top of that. So I was always afraid to go to only have a teaching degree, because I remember, and it's a sad state, but I think we can all relate to that. I remember the teachers who you sort of stood in their class and felt like they didn't enjoy their job and they didn't like students. And so I never wanted to be that teacher. So I always wanted to have what I used to call something to fall back on. I wanted to make sure that I had something, I had education enough that I could say, if I ever got to a point in teaching where I decided this is no longer for me, that I had something that I was still passionate about and something that I could still do. So I actually have a degree in criminal justice and public policy. So I got that degree and then went to teachers college and became a teacher. So I teach in the same school board that I grew up in. So I sort of born and raised in the area that I am. And I love that. I have a lot of connection to where I teach. I have a lot of connection to, I get to see my old teachers. I get to work with some of my old teachers, which is a pretty cool thing. But education is just something that's always, there's no teachers in my family. It's just something that I've always wanted to do. And I don't know if there was really a why. I can't pinpoint, like a moment or a specific teacher. I just know that I've had teachers who just made me feel good. They just made me, feel like I belonged and like I mattered. And so that I guess sort of pointed me in the direction to where I am today.
Perfect. Oh, that's wonderful. And I mean, it's very interesting to hear, you say that you have criminal justice and then you went into teaching. So now my question is to you, once you started teaching, what was something that you wish you knew before you started teaching?
What was something I wish I knew? I wish I knew that report cards weren't the be all and end all of our students. Because that was always a major focus. I need to do this because I need to write report cards. And it took so much away from being able to see our learners as learners and versus just numbers and data. Numbers and data are important, but the person is more important. And so when we're so focused on numbers and data, we're missing out on opportunities to learn from our students and to allow them to learn. But I think, to be honest, I mean, other than that, and I think that's a really basic answer because, I mean, report cards are a lot of work. But I think I can say with honesty that there is nothing that I wish I would have known because I am who I am today because I didn't know what I didn't know then. And I had to learn it. And I had to burn bridges. I had to make those mistakes. I had to fail. And I had to have a talking to. Like all of those things needed to happen in order for me to become comfortable in who I am, become the educator who I am today. So I'm grateful for everything I didn't know because it gave me reason to learn it and understand it.
Nice. So going along with failures, like you said, that for us as teachers and educators, I mean, that's something that happens. I mean, you learn as you go, you make those mistakes. And I like what one of my friends, or he was a guest, Al Kingsley, who said, mistakes, failures, they're stepping stones to success. So if I may ask, what is maybe a situation or a failure, that helped you, I guess, let me see. This is what I want to ask. What is an example of a mistake or failure that you may have experienced and what did you learn from it?
So I always, whenever I'm asked this question, I always think of two times, one with a student and one with a colleague. And I remember I had a little girl who was difficult. She was a challenge for me. I couldn't connect with her, but what I learned was that I wasn't trying to connect with her. I was fueling her fire so that I had reason to send her to the office and I could wash my hands of it because I didn't know how to deal with her because she didn't respond to what I thought was best. And then one day she wasn't at school, and then the next day she wasn't at school. And on the third day, her mom showed up at school and she wanted to speak to me. And I was quite a new teacher. I think I'd been teaching for only 2 or 3 years. And you still have no idea what you're doing and 2 or 3 years in. And so she wanted to have a conversation, and she looked me in the eye and she said, she does not want to come to school because she thinks that you don't like her. And I was really offended in that moment. I got my back up immediately. But in the moment I was like, okay, but I don't like her because she makes my job really hard. And then I sort of stopped and thought about that for a second and realized how awful that felt because we don't love all of our students. none of them are supposed to know that. A principal said that to me. You don't have to like every kid, but not one of them is ever supposed to know that you don't like them. Just like kids don't all love us, and just like adults don't all love us. We don't love everybody we come across, but as an educator, you are in a position to have these vulnerable people in front of you, and they need to feel loved, and they need to feel cared for, and they need to feel safe. And physically, yes, that goes without saying, but they need to feel safe emotionally. And I wasn't doing that for her. And I didn't know that because I didn't care to stop. I didn't care. I didn't know to stop and reflect on that because I was just simply looking at her behavior. And I wasn't, Brian often says, all behavior is a form of communication. And maybe that's what I wished I knew back then, actually, if I could retract my answer. And she was communicating with me, and she was telling me that what I was doing wasn't working for her. And I was too stubborn to change it because I was the boss. And that mom talking to me and telling me that was such a huge eye opener for me. And for me and this little girl, everything changed the next day. She came into school the next day, and I made the decision to change the way I looked at her, change the way I spoke to her, change the way I handled situations. And from then on, we became like best buds. I loved that little girl by the time the year was. I remember crying when I had to say goodbye on the last day of school because we just developed a really close connection. And it took that point. It took sort of hitting that point where she did not want to come to school anymore. And it was because of me. And that's not ever supposed to happen. So that was a really big one that sort of turned the way I looked at kids who sort of are coming to us, and maybe they're not as easy as other kids. And then in my technology journey, I was really, as you can tell, super passionate about it. And what I didn't know that I was doing was throwing my passion at other people, but not in a, hey, this is what I love kind of way. It was, hey, this is what you should be doing kind of way. And so I started to really advocate for coding and why it was important in our program, but I wasn't listening to people. I wasn't listening to body language. I wasn't listening to comments. I wasn't listening to sort of the unspoken things that people were saying or weren't saying. And I started seeing that because they weren't moving in their journey as fast as I was, I started seeing it as them not moving at all. When in fact, what I realized is they were moving at the speed with which they were comfortable at. And so it caused a lot of friction between myself and my colleagues because I wasn't open I wasn't having an open mind to what they were trying to say. I was simply looking at what I thought that they weren't doing. So it took my amazing administrator to sit back and sit with me and say, here's what it sounds like from their end. And until she said that to me, I had no idea that that's how I was coming across. And she was very kind and she was very gracious about it. And she was waiting too. It was not a conversation of this is what you're doing wrong. It was, this is what you need to understand about how you're coming across. And so it really allowed me to sit back and kind of reflect and think about how I was, just, passing my message along or sharing what I was passionate about, sharing my message, and how you can do that in a way that doesn't overwhelm people, that doesn't make people feel like they're less than because they're not where you are. And so I really learned how to, and still learning how to do that, to make sure that I'm respecting all of my colleagues and respecting where they are in their journey and understanding that their journey doesn't need to mirror mine. And there's nothing wrong with that. And, that was a big stepping stone for me, was realizing that, I needed to kind of sit back, and my way was not the only way. Took time to learn that.
Yeah. Oh, but that's great. I mean, like you said, and it's what it is. It's a journey. It's a learning journey.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't even matter how long you've been in education. I mean, we're continually learning things. And I think the most important thing is to be very receptive of, like, hey, I sometimes you may not realize the way that we may be coming off or things of that sort. And it's okay to say, hey, you know what? let me reflect on that. I'm so sorry. Let me take a different approach. But you're always learning. I mean, we are in the people business, like Josh Tovar, who's joining us here. I love what he always says. We are in the people
Yeah.
business. We work with colleagues, we work with adults, we work with kids. And, that it's all about communication and, figuring that out. And sometimes, like you said, it's important to take that step back and just take things in a different approach and respect where everybody's at. And especially now, going from brick and mortar to virtual, and
Mhm.
then now coming back, and now, there's teachers that feel a little bit more comfortable with the tech. There's teachers that now are coming back, and I call it the muscle memory. They come back in that comfort zone, and, they just kind of put the tech aside, and now everything is kind of the way that they used to teach and
Mhm.
so on. So now let me ask you about that. How has your transition been from virtual to now coming back face to face? What are some of the challenges that maybe you have seen for yourself, and maybe just within the school district?
So as much as I love technology, I eat, sleep, and breathe, my phone, my laptop, my iPad, fill in the blanks. I loathed virtual learning because I love my people, and I like to be in the room with them, and all that hands-on learning. So coming back into the classroom was absolutely best case scenario for me. As far as challenges are concerned, I think the biggest challenge for me is sort of all of the physical protocols we obviously have to follow for safety. So we can't gather in groups, so that makes things really difficult because we're all sitting in desks in rows facing forward. I've never had to teach that way, so learning to be able to live within those confines and making sure that all my students are physically safe has been very challenging. I've had to learn new ways to build community because so much of what I was doing had to do with physical space in the classroom. Even as far as I started thinking about, why my students are maybe behaving a certain way at a certain time of day. And when with our younger students, we're constantly moving. We're transitioning from reading on the carpet in the rocking chair to sitting in our groups to moving to another group. And that's no longer happening. So if we were getting up 5-6 times within half an hour, moving to a different space to do the same lesson, we're now only sitting in a chair at a desk facing forward for that exact amount of time. And there's only so many, get up and let's do a random, just dance on the smartboard. They're not interested in that. That is not, enough movement for them. It's not purposeful transition for them. So I've had to figure out ways to ensure that their needs are being met in terms of how they're moving through the classroom, but also making sure that obviously they're safe. That has been one of the biggest challenges. And then obviously teaching with a mask and all of that stuff makes things physically challenging. But and the physical challenges obviously are exhausting, and so that adds to that sort of emotional piece. So the other sort of biggest it's not okay, it's a challenge because it's something you have to be constantly aware of. You just have to be constantly aware of your mindset and where you are, and how much time am I spending complaining about having to wear a mask, because that's not healthy. How much time am I spending complaining that my kids are behaving in a way that I'm not enjoying? Am I spending more time complaining about it, or am I spending more time reflecting on how to either get over it or get on with it? So that's challenging too, is making sure that you're allowing yourself time to vent and say what you need to say and get it out there, but then pulling it back in and making sure that you're still focusing on the really great things that are happening right now. So making sure that you have that balance.
Yeah, no, and that's very important, and at least, throughout, seeing my friends on social media, and then getting to talk to some of my friends, through our chats and things of that sort, and asking them the same thing, what have been some of your biggest challenges? And, they mentioned, it's in coming back, teachers seem to be fighting to get back to the way things were,
Mm-hmm.
and not adapting to the way things are now and the
Are.
way that they're moving. And I think you said it very well, where am I spending more time just complaining because I want to go back to the way things were? But it's okay, get it out there, voice what you need to voice, but then it's like, hey, you know what? let's improvise, let's adapt, let's overcome, and let's move forward from this point on.
Mhm.
And like you said, focus on those little victories, those little micro victories that you can get, day in and day out, and just continually move forward and, focus on that. And, but yeah, like you said, that balance definitely is important. And before we start talking a little bit more about Gracie, I'm curious to know too, Daphne, what are some ways that you yourself too as well um, keep up professionally, as far as PD on your own, conferences, things of that sort? What are some ways that you seek that professional development?
I love conferences. Obviously, things are a little bit different right now, but I will go to any conference that I'm allowed to go to. I just really love learning. I was the kid who would sit in the back of the class and just listen all day long to just learning. I love to learn. I love to read. I'm an educator, but I'm also an editor for Codebreaker, so I read daily. I get a lot of professional development through social media and through our professional learning network there. I will follow certain educators, and I will reach out to certain people when I'm looking for something specific. I love researching just whatever sort of topic I'm interested in, and then with my PLN, what I'm learning to do is build that network around those specific things. So if I'm looking for something on STEM and making, I'm going to reach out to Chris Woods because he is sort of a go-to on that. If I'm looking for anything coding and tech, I'm going to reach out to Brian. If I'm looking for something on leadership, I'm going to reach out to Brian as well. But I have a host of different people that I've met through social media. And what I love about that is the people that I'm talking to are tried and true. So I can say, hey, what do you think about this tool? Or what do you think about this strategy? And they've done it and they've used it. So they can tell me with honesty, hey, it worked for these reasons. It didn't work for these reasons. But I get a lot of my professional development from just people who are doing the work. And yeah.
Yeah, no, and I'm with you on that. I think with being connected now is the biggest thing. And,
Yeah.
starting back in 2017 when I first joined Twitter and not realizing, the importance of being a connected educator till later on where, before it was just following people and now it's actually connecting. And like you said, if I want an answer, I'm going to go straight to the source. I'll just tweet somebody or
Yeah.
just direct message them and say, hey, any suggestions? And it's amazing the like Matthew Joseph says the power of connections. That's what his whole book's about. And being able to collaborate with people not just within your school, within your state, but around the globe, and get ideas from the people that are doing it, that definitely is amazing. And I love having that access, especially through the Codebreaker family, and of course Brian being a great leader, and then everybody that has been part of the Codebreaker family too as well. There are people that are out there that are just not talking the talk, but I mean they're walking that walk.
Yeah.
And it's great to be able to be part of that family too as well. So talking about inspiration, talking about the what you do for Codebreaker too as well, but you yourself have also authored a book, and we've got here Discover Gracie. So I did pop in the link into the chat, but I will be popping this into the show notes as well. So tell us a little bit about the inspiration or the story behind Gracie here.
So this is my favorite story. So Gracie is based on the character of Gracie is based on four students that I taught. As I mentioned earlier, sort of disengaged from school, and I took these kids and I kind of took the best pieces of all of them and built this little character, and this is Gracie. So Gracie's that kid whose teacher brings a robot into school and teaches her how to code, and her imagination kind of comes to life, and she starts to realize all of the things that she can do and learn about, and through this robot and through coding. And Gracie came to life through my students, but the actual idea came, or the project itself came to life because of Brian, our friend Brian Aspinall. So I had been to a conference, and I was presenting at a conference. I had a friend there, a mutual friend of mine and Brian's, who I didn't know. I didn't know Brian at the time. A couple weeks later, that friend was at another conference with Brian, and they exchanged my name. And then Brian reached out to me and had asked, I'd heard about you at this conference. Are you interested in writing a blog for my website? So I was very starstruck. I was a big fangirl, and I was following everything he was doing on Twitter. I loved what he was doing in his classroom. So absolutely, I'm going to write this blog post for you. And so I did, and it was very well received. I was really excited to do that. And then a few months later, he reached out and he said, have you ever considered writing a children's book? And it was through a DM, and I remember responding, yes, but I've never known where to start. And he responded with what I've said forever, the 3 words that kind of changed my life. And he said, you just start. So I remember reading those words and literally grabbing a piece of paper and a pen where I was sitting outside at the time, and I just started. That's exactly what I did. So at the time, I knew that I wanted it to be about coding, but I knew that there was quite a few books about coding, and I wasn't familiar with any about robotics. So I knew that I wanted it to be about robotics, and it had to be about a little girl because I'm a girl and I have a little girl and I advocate for girls in STEM. And I took pieces of my life and sort of sprinkled it throughout the whole book. And Gracie came to life. Gracie will be out for 2 years. This December. She'll be almost 2 years old. Gracie came out in December of 2019. The following summer, Brian and I collaborated together, and we wrote the second book called What Happens When I Learn to Code. And Gracie is the main character. It's a nonfiction, and it basically goes through sort of all of those soft skills. So when I learned to code, I'm a risk taker, and here's why. And it kind of gives kids that sort of real life stuff of what you become as you learn to code. And then the third book came out last year, and it was called Gracie the Maker. And Gracie the Maker is the story of Gracie, and she meets a new friend, and they have a class pet that is a tortoise, and the tortoise has a problem. And so together they build this sort of Rube Goldberg contraption with coding in there to help this tortoise and solve its problem. And they do that through coding and STEM and making. And that was the third Gracie that came out last year.
Man, that is awesome. I love that. And, one of the things that you said, advocating for girls in STEM, and this is something that's definitely very important. And I know when I was in the classroom and even now doing summer STEM camps, and I know for a while, maybe because of pandemic, we haven't done those, but I'm just excited to be able to get those going again. I mean, it was just great to be able to have, 4th, 5th, 6th graders, girls that were just so interested in coding and just doing some amazing work, being part of the code club and just taking off from there. And then, of course, in the summer STEM camps, what I loved is as the years went by in the summer STEM camps, the last year that we were able to actually do it face to face, it was a 50-50 split between boys and girls. And I loved it. And to me, it's something that is so important because I'm a big advocate for that in girls in STEM. And, one of the things in my research studies that I've done and during my doctoral program, taking a course in special topics in STEM and talking about that, like what can we do to promote, what can we do to get more girls involved in STEM? To me, that is relevant. We definitely need more of that. And I love the fact that you take your passion for tech, you take your own personal story there too as well. And now you have created Gracie here and these books. Tell us a little bit about here, Gracie TV. What is Gracie TV?
So Gracie TV was something I started doing during the pandemic. Much like all of us picked up some kind of random habit or rather hobby. And so Gracie TV, it's the link to our Codebreaker YouTube channel. And so I use an app to make Gracie videos. And so I've got Gracie there on the screen and she talks through this app. And then I just created a variety of there's some how-to videos, some explainer videos. And I make them for fun because I love to make things, and that I just create little videos with. I use WeVideo. I use Apple's Keynote. I use a couple of apps on my phone, and I just kind of smash everything together. I add some graphics and music, and create little videos when I feel like it.
That's awesome. That's wonderful, but it's great. It's a creative outlet for
It
you.
is.
You created this character out of your passion. And I think that's something that people need to see. That's something that students need to see. And I know when Brian was here, he said, he found his passion for code breaker, while he was teaching, but he was always advocating for students to say, hey, find your
Yep.
passion, find it and monetize it, do something with it. But it's funny that those words also resonate with me. You just start, you just
Mhm.
do it. And thanks to Brian for that too as well, because he's definitely played a big role in what I've been able to do. And always just thinking about what he does. And obviously his book that just came out also was great, just to hear his story. And oftentimes people think like, oh no, I can never do that. I mean, these people,
But you
they're
can.
they're they're edufamous, they've got it all together. I was like, no man,
Mm,
we're just regular people. And then when they get to see you here on the show, and they got to see Brian, they're like, it's like, hey, that's just a regular guy, regular person, but they're just sharing their passion. They're
yeah.
just putting themselves out there. And how do you start? You just
You
start.
just
You
start.
just do it, and that's it. So that's wonderful. I did pop the link here into the chat as well, because there you do have a contact info here, just in case anybody's ever interested
Mhm.
in bringing Daphne to their campus, their school, maybe for a camp or anything of that sort. You can definitely get in contact with her as well. But again, all of this will be there in the show notes also. And I love what Josh Tovar says here. Like, he also says, is like, hey, we all put our pants on the same way. Maybe one, I don't know,
One
maybe
leg,
left
two
leg, maybe
legs.
both legs. I don't know. It just all depends, but we just do it and we get there. Wow. So anyway, Daphne, thank you so much. And we're not done yet, just transitioning here to some other questions as we're kind of getting to the tail end of the show here. But I just wanted to talk to you a little bit more, as far as um, your fork in the road moment. Have you ever had a fork in the road moment? And what led you either left or right in that fork in the road moment? Can you share something with us there?
Um, I think, um, let's see. If we go the education route, I think there was a moment in my career where, or when I started my career, I was always of the belief that you walked into a school, you started teaching, and you left and retired 25 years later. I didn't love change. I didn't know that obviously I knew people would, could become administrators. That wasn't something that I was interested in. So I just thought I'd walk into a school, and after that first 5 years at my school, the school shut down. So I was forced to go to another school. So I went to another school, and again, I still had the same outlook. I'll just be here till my career's done. Um, and then I got to a point where I had this sort of sudden urge to change. I needed change. I'd been teaching the same grade for almost 8 years at that school, and I don't know where it came from. It was the first time I'd ever felt that I something needed to change. I needed something different, and I begged my administrator to put me into a kindergarten program. And that was a huge leap. It didn't feel like it on paper. You were teaching grade one, you're going to go teach kindergarten. It's only a year. It was I can't even describe the change, and nobody can describe it unless you've been there. And yeah, that was that moment where I had to sort of decide, do I want to stay here in grade 1 and 2 and continue what I'm doing? And I felt like I was good at it, and it was comfortable because I'd been doing it for so long. Or do I take this big leap here, and I might hate it, I might love it, I don't know. And I had to kind of make that decision from comfort and discomfort. But the gains that I would have gotten from discomfort obviously were going to outweigh comfort. And sort of, it was that moment that was, I think, the tipping point for me, because when I moved into kindergarten, it was extremely difficult, for a whole host of reasons. But it was the best decision I ever made, because it made me see that change was good. Forced, and it wasn't forced change. I made the choice. And it made me grow exponentially as an educator to be able to do that. And then, I stayed there for 1 year, and then I changed schools, and I stayed there for a couple of years. And then I met Brian and made a huge leap into working with Brian at Codebreaker. And then, now to moving to another school. And so now, change is, it's just kind of what I've become. Like, when I get to a point where I feel like I'm ready to keep going, I just keep going and I go in the direction that I feel like I need to go. Whereas that was never part of how I sort of saw things before. So that moment of comfort or discomfort, which way should I go? And I chose discomfort, was the best thing that I ever did.
Oh, that's great. I love you. I love that you share that story and just being so transparent and so honest, because oftentimes, like I said, people see you on social media, or they see like, hey, you know what, they're I think it's just like that whole edge of famous thing, and things like that sort. But like Jess was saying, it's like, hey, we're people, we go through things too as well. But I love that you're sharing and you're just openly transparent and honest, and I think a very genuine, and that's something more that we need, and that's why I love doing these shows and bringing people on to share with them, hey, everybody goes through a struggle, everybody goes through
Yeah.
those tough decisions, but look at that outcome, look at how great things turned out. Sometimes they may not turn out as great, but again, that learning, those are stepping stones towards success, those are stepping stones into a different direction, and it's okay to feel uncomfortable. And sometimes that's where you get refined and you continue
Yeah.
to grow. So
That's so
yeah,
true.
yeah, very true. All right, so Daphne, what are some ways that you yourself, just kind of get out of your headspace, when, let's say, you have a hard day, or maybe just, I just say, I just need to disconnect. What are some things that you love to do for fun to get out of your headspace?
So I'm a hockey player, not a good one. People go, "Oh wow, you are." Yeah, no, not that great. So that is a big part of my after school sort of decompressing time. I play with a bunch of girlfriends once a week, and that, like, I live for Tuesday nights, so that is a ton of fun. I like to create things. I like to make things. I like to during COVID, we have a pet tortoise, and during COVID, I started watching YouTube videos, and I taught myself how to crochet. So I make tortoise sweaters because it entertains me. So I like to just make things. And then, if I really just need sort of some downtime, I just kind of like to watch TV and just sort of numb the brain from thinking, and not trash TV, not reality TV, just regular old TV that I've seen. Like, I think I've watched Schitt's Creek, the entire series, 3 times. Like, just that comfort TV. I've watched Dirty Dancing and Footloose a million times. Just, I know what's coming. I don't have anything to think about, and it's just nice to kind of sit and unwind.
Oh no, I'm with you on that. Sometimes I like to veg out, and then what I do is I love to watch cooking shows, and so I'll just watch cooking, and I'll just put
Yeah.
them on repeat. But I
Yep.
already know what's coming. But like I said, it's a way for me just to decompress, and
Mhm.
it helps me out. All right, so a couple of other things here. I wanted to ask, what would you say currently is your edu kryptonite?
Okay, so I thought about this, and I think right now there is a big discussion on learning gaps or learning loss, or a lot of focus on what our kids can't do as a result of not having been at school for 18 months or in school for 18 months. And I get really heated when people start to talk about that, because if we're looking at our young learners, we can say things like, well, they barely know their letters. Yeah, because they haven't been at school for 18 months. Like, we can't, we can't expect miracles from these kids who have not been in a traditional learning space. And especially our youngest learners, this may be their first sort of real or normal, I don't like that word, but year at school. And look how different it is. So I get really passionate about, or it's not, I get heated, I get angry when we're spending our time right now focusing on, building those academic marks, and making sure that they're catching up on everything that they didn't learn before, or that they missed out on, or that they don't know. That's not our focus right now. Our focus needs to be on building our community. Our focus right now needs to be on, and we can say relationships till we're blue in the face, but no, it's bigger than that now. Our focus needs to be on allowing our learners to come to us where they are, and to let them know and to let them feel that where they are is okay, and we're going to meet them there. And by throwing tests and assessments and all of that stuff at them right now is not, it's just, I just don't feel that it's healthy for them. And it's not healthy for their families. We have, so many parents who are so worried about, oh my gosh, my kid didn't get to go to kindergarten because of COVID and now they're in grade 1 and they don't know how to read. No, that's okay. That's okay, because this is a different grade 1 than it was 3 years ago. And, we need to, not only do we need to let our kids know that, you are where you are and I'm going to meet you there and that's okay. We're going to get you to where you need to be. But we also need to let their families know that too. And if we're constantly talking about learning loss and learning gaps, we're creating stress. We're creating stress, and nobody needs extra stress right now. We're all doing a great job of making sure that we have enough stress in our lives. So as educators, we need to make sure that we're taking that burden away from parents and taking that burden away from our kids, and be okay with meeting them where they are.
Perfect. Love it. Daphne, if you can have a billboard with anything on it, what would it be and why?
So it would have to say, you just start. And why? Because that's how everything great happens. You just start.
I love that.
That's it.
Simple, straight to the point. There you
Yeah.
go. So for anybody that's watching and you are seeing people like, Daphne, the work that she's doing, you're seeing Brian, you're seeing Dr. Matthew Joseph, you're seeing Dr. Brandon Beck, you're seeing all of these people, what it is that they're doing. Guess what? You just start.
Yeah.
That's it. There's the secret. You just start. All right, Daphne. And the last question, one of my favorite questions that I love to ask my guests is, if this was your show and I was your guest, what would be one question you'd like to ask me?
Oh, that's a good one. What would I like to ask you? Okay, I'm going to throw it back at you. What is something that people would not guess about you, or not that they would not know about you, but what's something that somebody would not guess about you? What is something that you would be able to tell them that they would say, wow, I had no idea?
Oh man, that is a good question. I don't know. I'm pretty I'm pretty open and transparent on social media, so I think everybody. But I don't think that anybody would actually. There's anything there, honestly. I mean, I don't know. You kind of stumped me there. That is such a good question. I'd probably have to get back at you on that one, but I don't know. Well, I'll throw some other things out there. I don't know many people. I know I've been hanging around a lot on social media with the punk rock classroom guys, Josh Buckley and Mike Earnshaw, and our love of music. And I don't think many people may have ever known that I was a punk rock kid growing up. I was actually in a ska band. Played
No
saxophone.
way.
Yeah,
See,
played
there you go.
there you go. Played saxophone in a ska band. Played bass guitar in another punk band. Played what else did I play? Drums in another band. So yeah, so they probably wouldn't think that I play a couple of instruments. So that's something that might surprise some people, that there is some musical talent aside from all this podcasting life and all that good stuff. But yeah, so yeah, that would be it. Love and music. But yeah, so Daphne, I really appreciate you so much. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here and just really just sharing your passion and loving the work that you're doing. And just thank you for being open and honest with just how great it can actually be to just put some of these tools in the hands of the littles, and they're growing up, they're building up, they're developing these skills that are cross curricular, that are part of school. And we definitely need more advocates for that, and starting them off younger. And thank you so much for the work that you do also for advocating for girls in STEM, women in STEM, because that's definitely something that's great. And just thank you so much for the work that you do for Codebreaker. I remember the very first time when I started seeing a little bit more of Codebreaker and being more aware. And I was like, hey man, these guys are so cool. Like I want to be part. And then I remember sending an email and you replied right away. And I said, hey, can you guys put my podcast on there? They're like, yeah, welcome to the Codebreaker family and all this other stuff. And so just thank you so much for making me feel welcome, through the work that you do. And Brian also as well, and everybody on the rest of the team, because it's just been wonderful experience, and really have learned a lot from you guys as far as just really being unapologetically me.
That's
and
amazing.
it has made me feel great, where I feel comfortable in my own skin and in what I'm doing. And like, just like Brian said, you just start, and that's what I've been doing, and just continually moving forward. So thank you, Daphne. Thank you,
Thank
Brian. Thank you,
you.
Codebreaker, for everything that you're doing. And I did share the links to how people can get to, connect with you on Twitter. And
Awesome.
also, there is the website here.
Yes.
If you want to go to daphnemcmenemy.com, you can all go ahead and find her blog. You can find a little bit about Daphne too, as well as, you can read a little bit about the work that she's doing. She's got all her social media links here as well. And of course, you can also meet Gracie here, and you can go ahead and find all the books and see where they are available for purchase. So make sure that you check out the website, connect with Daphne, see the work that she's doing. Make sure that you stop by and you yourself discover Gracie, and bring Gracie into the classroom.
Yes.
And if you
do
can, you
that.
can actually bring Daphne into your classroom as well. So you make sure that you connect with her. And guys, thank you so much for joining us here today. Thank you to Josh Tovar, everybody that's watching, anybody that's going to be rewatching later or re-listening to the show. Thank you so much for making My EdTech Life what it is today. Please make sure that you visit our website, myedtech.life. Check out all our past episodes. Check out our blogs as well. And please, guys, give us some feedback. As always, for me, this is my passion, to connect educators and creators one show at a time. Let us know what we're doing well. Let us know what you'd like to see. I'm always open, for any of your suggestions, because we want to give you the best. I want to give you the best of me. So thank you so much for being part of our My EdTech family. And Daphne, as always, thank you so much for being part of my PLF, my personal learning family. And you always have an open invite here, my friend. Anytime
Fonz,
you
thank
let
you.
us know, and you can come back. So thank you so much to everybody. And this week, everything lined up. Tomorrow, we have Charles Williams on the show. We've got 2 shows back to back. That's a first in My EdTech Life history. But when things line up, you take advantage of it and you just do it. So tomorrow, please make sure that you join us live with Charles Williams. We'll definitely be talking about leadership there as well. So again, guys, thank you so much. And until next time, my friends, don't forget, stay techie.